is State versus Antonio NIX. He's present in custody by video with his attorney, Mr. Lewis. 19W12800. This is a criminal attempt to commit a felony. We have Detective Bell here from the Gwinnett County Police Department. May I swear in the witness, Your Honor?
Okay.
Detective Bell, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear.
Please state your name.
Detective Jeremiah Bell.
They have armed robberies. I don't know that there's a tremendous difference, Judge, between armed robbery and criminal attempt to commit armed robbery. Obviously, in terms of sentences and in terms of bond eligibility in magistrate court, but it may be a real armed robbery. It may be a criminal attempt to commit armed robbery. I'm ready on either one, Judge.
What's the intended? What's the warrant supposed to be for?
It's criminal attempt. There was no actual property taken in the armed robbery, so
Okay.
it will be criminal attempt, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Henderson.
All right, and Detective Bell, I swore you in, and you introduced yourself as Jeremiah Bell. Where do you work?
Gwinnett County Police Department.
How long have you been there?
A little over 7 years.
And are you post-certified?
I am.
What was your role in this case, Detective?
I was the lead investigator. I was called out that night to come investigate.
And what did you find out in the course of your investigation?
In the early morning hours of August 20th, 2019, there was a person shot call reported at 3177 Terrace Court at Apartment E in Peachtree Corners. When officers arrived, they met with the victims inside the apartment. There was a significant amount of blood leading from the parking lot back to the apartment. And the two victims were inside the apartment with several other occupants. They had reported that there was, originally they reported it as a home invasion, that two males broke into the apartment and attempted to rob them, but they fired back and struck Mr. NIX 2 times, and then Mr. NIX fled in the vehicle. There was a juvenile suspect who had run away on foot. That juvenile suspect was apprehended as officers arrived to the scene, and he was detained until they could figure out what his involvement was. At the time, the juvenile defendant was asked some questions and identified that he was there at the apartment with his friend named Antonio NIX, and that they had come there eventually, he said, to buy drugs. And there was a purchase that was set up, and that during the purchase there was a disagreement about price or something to that effect, and there were drugs produced in large bags. And at that point in time, Mr. NIX produced a handgun and attempted to take the drugs from the two victims inside the apartment, at which time the two victims produced their own handguns, and there were shots fired and a struggle over the gun, at which point Mr. NIX sustained 2 gunshot wounds and fled in a white Dodge Challenger, which later that morning was found wrecked in the city of Atlanta, and Mr. NIX was found a short distance away suffering from gunshot wounds and injuries resulting from the traffic accident. He was taken to the hospital at that time, and the juvenile defendant was interviewed and gave his statement regarding Mr. NIX's involvement in the incident that night. And after several days of speaking with the victims, who initially left out the fact that it was a drug deal, they did come to their senses and tell the truth that it was in fact a drug deal that had gone wrong. Mm-hmm. And then Mr. NIX had produced a handgun in an effort to take the drugs away from them without purchase, but they returned fire in self-defense. And no property was actually taken from either of the victims, and that Mr. NIX escaped shot.
What kind of drugs were involved?
They were set up to sell ecstasy pills, Xanax bars, and Percocets. All prescription pills.
Okay. Do you see the defendant anywhere?
Judge, we'll stipulate.
Yes, I do.
Antonio NIX has a mask on. We'll stipulate that it's Antonio NIX.
Thank you. Detective, You spoke of this address in Peachtree Corners. What county is that located in?
It's inside Gwinnett County.
Anything, Detective, you'd like to add?
As a part of the testimony that the juvenile defendant gave in this, he mentioned some very specific facts about leading up to the incident where Mr. NIX picked him up at his apartment, and they had a brief conversation about wanting to get a hold of some drugs so that, according to this juvenile defendant's words, that Antonio said that he wanted to, that he needed to get some money, and that's what brought up the conversation about the pills, and that he knew of some friends that needed to buy pills, and that he wanted to get these pills to then sell to his friends. At no point would there ever mention any of purchasing it. He just said he wanted to get them so that he could sell them.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Those are the questions that I have for the detective.
Detective Bell, you indicated good afternoon. You indicated that officers responded to a person shot call. Was anyone other than Antonio NIX shot?
Antonio NIX was the only one that was shot.
Okay.
There were some minor superficial injuries on the victims as a result of the struggle that they had, the physical struggle inside the apartment over the weapon.
Okay. And if I understand you correctly, the vehicle that fled the scene, did the witnesses tell you that Mr. NIX was driving that vehicle? They did, okay. That vehicle was crashed, Mr. NIX was found with a gunshot wounds, is that right?
Correct. On, I believe it was Bolton Road inside the city limits of Atlanta. It
So
wrecked out off the road.
Okay, so I'm assuming he went to the hospital, correct?
He did.
Okay, was that, I guess, here's my real question, and I'm trying to sort of lead up to it in a logical fashion. That happened on August 21st. The warrant was taken when? April what?
No, the warrant was taken on August 20th.
August 20th, okay. And so we're sitting here now in May on a prelim. Because he fled from the hospital? What's your understanding of what happened between the time he got treated at the hospital and today?
I'm not sure. He was in the custody of Atlanta police or at the Fulton County Jail with regard to the vehicle. The vehicle was reported stolen from a carjacking in the city of South Fulton. So they had their own original charges, and since he was apprehended in their jurisdiction, I can only assume that their charges took precedence over ours, and that they needed to be cleared, and him from the hospital and his charges taken care of there before they could bring him from that. That's my only explanation for
That's no
that.
problem. So you're left with the impression he's been in custody since the vehicle was crashed, is that right?
That's my understanding. I have not looked into it any further than that. I just knew that he was in custody the day of the crash, and that's when the warrant that I took out was taken.
The juvenile was also charged in criminal attempt to commit armed robbery?
Yes, he was.
The juvenile, when you spoke to the juvenile, he told you about a conversation that he and my client had before they ever went to the residence, is that right?
Correct. After Mr. NIX picked him up from the apartment.
Did the juvenile indicate that there was one gun or more than one gun in Mr. NIX's possession?
He only mentioned one gun, and he didn't know, according to the juvenile, he didn't know that the gun was on him until he went into the apartment with Mr. NIX, and he saw it sticking out of his waistband.
Okay, so the juvenile himself didn't walk into the apartment with a gun, is that right?
The juvenile himself did not. Mr. NIX was the only one of those two, of the two suspects that were...
Yeah, right. The witnesses inside the apartment, did they indicate if two males that entered had guns, or if only one male had a gun?
Only one male had a gun.
Did they describe the gun?
It was with them at the apartment because they had wrestled it away from Mr. NIX and the struggle that ensued after he... Yes.
Okay. So the gun was located. Okay. And the gun used to shoot Mr. NIX, was that gun taken by the police?
It was held briefly, but no tests were run on it, no ballistics or anything of that nature.
Do you know if my client said anything when he was found at the scene where the vehicle was wrecked?
I'm not certain. I believe, if I remember correctly, that the officers who encountered him said that he was pretty out of it due to the loss of blood. So I don't think that he was making any any real statements at the time.
And that wasn't from any police chase, that was just the police coming upon a crashed vehicle and finding somebody who had been shot, is that right?
That's my understanding, is that someone called in a vehicle accident, a car off the side of the road or something to that effect. They found the car, they found the blood inside the vehicle, and began searching the area for an injured person, and came upon him somewhere in the area.
How soon after the shooting did you learn that the vehicle had crashed and he had been found in Atlanta?
It was a matter of hours. It was a matter of hours. I don't know the exact time. I know that we were still at the apartment conducting interviews, speaking to witnesses and so forth, when we received word from our radio dispatcher that there had been a call in Atlanta involving a white Dodge Challenger, and they had a person shot that they had found.
When you responded, all of the blood, most of the blood was inside the apartment, indicating that Mr. NIX had been shot inside the apartment. Is that correct?
It did appear that the blood started inside the apartment, which was consistent with what the victim said as far as when they shot him. And then the blood trail led back outside to the parking lot in the area of where the white Dodge Challenger was said to have been parked.
In terms of victim and witnesses, how many people were inside at the time of the shooting? Do you know?
There were a total of, bear with me one moment if you don't mind. There were a total of 6 people inside the apartment. So the 2 victims and then 4 people inside, including one of the victims' infant children.
When the juvenile was apprehended at the scene, did he give Mr. Antonio NIX's name at that time or at a later time?
At that time.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Judge.
Any follow-up, Ms. Henderson?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, may this detective be excused? Any objection?
Yes.
Any objection, Mr. Lewis?
No, thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Detective Bell.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Henderson?
Judge, we don't have no further witnesses.
Mr. Lewis?
Judge, respectfully, I don't have any witnesses and I don't have any argument in regards to the criminal attempt to commit armed robbery being bound over.
Okay. So as to warrant number 19W12800, the defense has stipulated and the court is going to find that sufficient probable cause has been established for the criminal attempt to commit armed robbery. Anything further, Mr. Lewis?
Judge, I think you've already indicated that there's no bond in the case, and I have filed a bond motion on the case, believing it to be an armed robbery, understanding that it's now a criminal attempt to commit armed robbery, and I'm going to wait to address that in Superior Court, because I may need to get some witnesses to come and testify on his behalf.
Okay, all right. The parties are excused in that case.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.